What's up, everybody? Welcome to BzG's official review for Captain America Civil War. My name is Barrett Courtney. I'm one of your hosts today, and here, joined with me, is a special guest host, Alyssa Shimoda. What's up, Alyssa? How you doing today?
Hi, good.
Doing great? How you feeling after leaving the movie?
I'm very tired.
Very tired. You had a long day.
I had a very long day, very long week. But worth it, because I really wanted to see Captain America.
Yeah?
But I also ran 3 miles today, which was pretty impressive. Also the most I think I've ever run in one go, so I was very exhausted.
Yeah. I'm feeling great.
Now here we are.
Ran into the nice people from Kind of Funny before we saw the show. And so that was great. And then we saw the show, and that will be what we talk about today. Now, before we get into it, I just want to say how we're going to do this today. And I think this is sort of similar to how we did it for Batman v Superman, the review I did with Ricky Baldazan, is the first couple of minutes we're going to give our non-spoilery thoughts here. In case you haven't seen the movie yet, because I can understand we're trying to get this video up by Friday morning, so I can totally understand if you haven't seen it yet, because it just came out last night. So, for you folks out there who haven't seen it, you can watch the first couple of minutes, and then I'll let you know when we get into spoilers, so you can click off, go see the movie, and then come back here and make sweet love to us. Or
no, thank you. Hard pass.
Okay, so Alyssa, not giving away any spoilers.
Okay, wait, can I start off then by saying that I think it's really weird that we live in a world where Civil War is now a movie?
It's a movie? Oh, fuck yes.
Yes. Because
I was talking to Tim before we went into the theater of, like, he was saying, like, he can't believe that, like, this was real. And I was telling him, like, this is what I, like, right since they kicked off the MCU and they announced that, like, hey, this is going to be, like, a full-fledged, like, universe with all of these characters. Civil War was all, like, from the get-go, Civil War was the story I wanted them to do. And now we fucking have it. And it's crazy.
I remember when we figured out that it was that Civil War was probably going to come up next. And I was like, oh my God, can they do it?
Yeah.
And then we did find out it was coming in 2016. And I was like, oh my God, 2016 is so far away. It's never going to come.
And then it was weird that it was a Captain America movie and not an Avengers movie. And we'll get a little bit into that. But Alyssa, without revealing any spoilers, what did you think of the movie? So
it's good that you mentioned that we had some doubts about, like, it's a Captain America movie, not an Avengers movie. And how are they going to do this when they don't have the rights to everybody? Because this is actually one of the comics that I own, and I did read.
It's right over there.
I own.
You read it last night.
I bought it. I reread it in time for the movie. I even went and grabbed some of the spin-offs at some point when I have time for reading in the summer when I'm not working. So I did have a lot of doubts when they first announced Civil War, because I was like, you can't do this right. You don't have Spider-Man. You don't have Fantastic Four. I know, but at the time, I was like, Spider-Man's super important. Fantastic Four is super important. Mr. Fantastic.
I mean, there could, if they decided to do things like spoilers for the Civil War comic, like the negative zone, if they decided to do things like that, they could easily just make it like it's Tony Stark's idea, right? Because they've done that thing in the past where Ant-Man is actually the creator of Ultron, but for the sake of the story, they made it Tony Stark.
Right. No, and so that's what I wanted to say, is that originally I had my doubts because I actually know the comics, and I was like, oh no, how can they do this? But I was really impressed and happy with the way that they changed the story, and it was still true. And yeah, I was impressed with how they changed the story to make it work for the MCU, but I also was pleased with, like, little things, little homages that were similar to the comic book. Like, they still do the whole thing where
don't say it.
Okay, fine. Well, they do
spoilers.
I know it doesn't feel like a spoiler because it came from the comic book, but so they do things in the comic books that are not quite the same, but still are parallel, or they mirror events
from the comic.
Comics.
Okay. Yeah. And to give my non-spoilery thoughts, I think, and I was just texting Alex O'Neill from Irrational Passions this, I think this is what comic book movies have been leading up to ever since the first X-Men movie. Because, you have your all fucking weird Captain America movies and Nick Fury movies from, like, the 80s and shit. And those were just not well thought out and whatnot. And when we finally got this sort of rebirth of superhero movies, it always felt like it was going to lead to something. And when The Dark Knight came out, I thought it was The Dark Knight. And I might be wrong, and, like, maybe in a couple of years I'll think differently when a different movie comes out. But right now I think it really was all leading up to Civil War. I think this is the best comic book movie ever. And that's not to say it's my favorite. I still love The Dark Knight. And I'll probably have to think a little bit more if I like this more than The Dark Knight. But the thing about this is The Dark Knight is very much a movie. It is a film, and it's a crime film, and it's less about the heritage of the comics. And so you have, like, the far left there, right, of, like, it's like a movie. And then you have the far right of Batman v Superman and sort of Age of Ultron, where those movies are very comic book in the way that they reveal plot, in the way that they are paced. Like, we all give shit to Age of Ultron and Batman v Superman, but I bet if we read those as comics, as comic book fans, we wouldn't give as much shit to them. And so you have the far left and the far right. And Civil War, I think, is in the perfect middle of, it is very much a comic book, but they've finally made it work in a movie format that pleases everybody. Apart from that, I think the story is one of the best. I do think in the beginning third of it is very slow. But I think they sort of had to do it on purpose to build up to certain plots. But at one point I was very much like, okay, where is this going? But then you get to some points and you're like, all right, fine, all right, whatever. So I think it is a masterpiece in comic book movies, and that's not to say it doesn't have faults, and we'll get into that in our spoiler stuff. But I think if you are even a little bit of an inkling of a comic book fan, and I don't care if you're a DC diehard fan or a Marvel diehard fan or fucking Dark Horse diehard fan, go see this movie, because it is what comic book movies need to be, and it's what all comic book movies should aspire to be. With that being said, let's go into spoilers. So this is your warning. Get the fuck out of here, go see the movie, and then come back and, again, make sweet love to us. All right. So,
where do we start?
Let's move.
Chronologically?
Let's go through chronologically.
Okay.
The reason I think the movie moves a little slow, and I also think this a little bit. I was watching Age of Ultron earlier today, and I think that both of them have a very long intro scene. The movie starts out with Crossbones, who was a former agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. / Hydra in Winter Soldier, and then the building fell on him, and he had surgery performed on him, and now he's like, in the beginning of the movie, he's trying to steal like this biohazard and try to make a biological like weapon. So I felt like that was very, at one point I was like, okay, let's move on, you know? And I felt like a lot of that in the beginning third act of the movie. But with that being said, almost every moment of it was still fun and was still really cool, of seeing the team work together and seeing like new people work with like the older team of Scarlet Witch, trying to find her place in the team. And at one point I was thinking that beginning scene was very long, but it did have a lot of gravity towards the rest of the movie, right? Of Crossbones basically, and I thought he was actually going to have a bigger part in this, but he basically commits suicide to try to also take Cap down. And is her name Wanda? Am I getting that? Okay, so Wanda like uses her powers to compress the explosion to just him, and she throws him up, and
she's trying to
protect Cap,
but also like she's trying to remove the
the bomb from the civilians on the ground
I also
floor,
feel like but she loses control. I think it's
I don't think she loses control. I just don't think she thought ahead of
how high to throw him up.
Yeah, and so she threw him up high, and he exploded like a couple floors of what was probably what looks like a hospital, I think, or some building, and it killed a lot of several people, and so that's where everything comes into play with the whole.
All of this was really clever, because I actually was more invested in that mistake than I was in the mistake that is made in the comic books, right? Like some dumb team of not even like C-list superheroes who are trying to make it big. Literally were stars. They admit to it, and that's a big plot point that they were just chasing ratings, and this guy does the same thing of like sort of exploding himself, except that's his power, so he doesn't die, but he creates an explosion to kill them, but also harms all of these school children. And
because it's in like a suburb,
and it's like you don't feel sorry for those guys because they were dumb. The superheroes messed up. They did,
it was clever. You feel sorry because like right after she did it, she like freaks out, and you see that pain. Yeah, and that's something I want to say is every emotional hit and every physical hit you feel in this movie. And I was like, very
emotional throughout this whole movie.
Even in Winter Soldier, I don't think it does it that well. If we were watching Winter Soldier last night, and it was so like. Even all the crazy action stuff, it was like sometimes it was funny and sometimes it was whoa. But it was like it was like me playing through Uncharted 3 the first time of holy shit, I'm feeling everything that these characters are feeling, like when it comes to emotional development and when it comes to like all of the physical shit that they put themselves through, and you feel every single punch. And so moving on with the story,
well, this is why it was also clever. The people that had died from her lifting crossbones into the air was a floor of Wakandian, like, not diplomats, but they'd gone in to do service work to make up for whatever, something. So that's why T'Challa. No, that's Black Panther.
Yeah,
the dad is like Chitara, whatever. Okay, so he's Black Panther's dad, the king of Wakanda, they were very upset because their people were killed while they had gone over to do like service work in another country, because they were actually in Nigeria, not Wakanda. Yeah. So that's how this whole registration act gets rolling, is because
I forget what it's called, like the
Sokovian Accords.
Sokovian Accords, and that's basically like the MCU's version of the Registration Act. Yeah.
And that was also clever because it was the United Nations, not the United States. Sorry.
So moving on with the plot, just because I don't want this video to be too long.
It was just clever. Yeah. I thought they did a really good job of like shifting it to be in the Marvel universe. And
so you get the Registration Act, the Sokovian Accords, and immediately and this was something I was scared about because Batman v Superman did not do this as well, of what are their morals here, and like why are they at odds with each other? And like right at the beginning, like when this is handed to them, like where they stand and why they stand there. And
there were definitely moments in the movie where I was like, this is very similar to Batman versus Superman, but also much more well done.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing, and I hate to compare the two, but it's similar sort of similar story, but
or they're just elements that overlapped that I was like, huh.
Yep. But I think there's a deeper level to all the fighting.
But I think they also had good material to use.
Oh yeah.
To base it off of.
But that's not all. No, that's another conversation.
Yeah, sorry.
So at one point the UN is getting together to sign these accords, and Cap decides to retire, Hawkeye decides to retire, and a couple of people sort of just leave, and Black Widow goes to this UN meeting in some country, Vienna. I just want to say, every time we went to a city, it was like the big, like, boom, like, this is where I didn't like that. I thought it was weird, and they did it a lot, because it was almost within, like, a span of 20 minutes, it was, like, 5 different cities of, like, boom, and it was like, okay, like, I think in Winter Soldier, this is just, like, a little editing fucking tick I have. I think in Winter Soldier, they did it just fine. It was, like, the like it was like typing out
it was a style thing.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing if it's a style choice, but from the same directors. And that was the weird thing for me. So I don't know. But anyway, the UN meeting is bombed. T'Challa's dad is killed. And that's like, you immediately, without having to give Black Panther an origin story, you immediately know like why he's in this and where he comes from. And it's done so well. And the UN bombing is blamed on Bucky. And because there's like a picture, an apparent photo of him leaving the crime scene. Now, before I get too much into this, before this scene, we got a hint at who our villain was.
Right.
And I don't want to say too much about him, but I just want to say that this first scene was in Cleveland. What's up? Represent. Even though that house looks nothing like a house in Cleveland. Cleveland finally got its dues. We let, fucking Marvel film in our city for so many years. We finally got Represent. So shout out to the Russo brothers for doing that. And he right off the bat is terrifying. So it's Daniel Bruhl playing, and he's from what I read, the Blue Jasmine and also Inglourious Bastards. He's like the German kid who has a movie made about him. And he is just fucking fantastic. And the torture scene, you were looking away because you don't like that shit. And even I was like on the edge of my seat of like, oh, this is really fucked up. And and there's a slow burn with him, where you're like, okay, so is he like with Hydra or is he with Sokovia?
What is he trying to do?
Yeah, like what is his? This is one of the few complaints I have. It's like, what is his sort of motivation? Bless you. And it takes a slow burn, and you really don't know why until the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
And so it paid off. But I totally understand if people were like, come on, why don't we know this yet? And I think it made it worth it by the end. And we'll get to that. I sort of want to rush through some more parts here. Okay. So we get to the bombing, and then they narrow in on Bucky, who apparently he claims that he had nothing to do with the bombing, and there's this whole chase scene, and Cap isn't part of the official Avengers team, so Cap is trying to like protect Bucky and get Bucky out of there, but they eventually get caught by the official Avengers team, and so Cap, I'm blanking on names now, Bucky and Falcon get arrested and put into sort of like light jail.
And Panther.
Black Panther also gets arrested, and then there's like they watch like the interrogation of Bucky, and the power is taken out, and you realize the person interrogating Bucky is Daniel Bruhl's character, which is Zemo, not Baron Zemo. It's like Colonel Helmet Zemo, which is interesting.
But maybe he's gonna turn into Zemo because they just arrested him.
Yeah, that's true.
It could still be.
Yeah, that's true.
This is the origins of Baron Zemo. Maybe I don't know enough about Baron Zemo to know.
Yeah, neither do I.
This is actually
so. We and he finds this book, and this was like the very beginning where there's like a sort of a flashback scene of this book with like sort of these like coded words that resets like Bucky's mind and like turns him back into the Winter Soldier. And so Zemo found this book. Yeah, he's basically like a sleeper. And so Zemo found this book, and when the power went out, he read the words to Bucky. Bucky goes haywire.
This was also really, I thought, clever because in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., whenever they would brainwash people, they turned them into, or the whole phrase was, are you ready to comply? Or whatever, like, yes, I'm ready to comply. And that is what Bucky says.
Yep.
When they say, good morning, soldier, and he says, ready to comply, or whatever.
They don't say good morning, they just say soldier.
The other one did. Whatever. I don't know, it stuck out to me. Anyway, but ready to comply. I was like,
and so, Cap tries to get Bucky out of there, and Zemo escapes, and blah 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 blah. They escape, and they knock Bucky like really hard in the head. And so when Bucky wakes up, and it's Cap, Falcon, and Bucky like hidden away, while the true Avengers are trying to look for them. Bucky wakes up and he remembers everything, and then we get into what happened after that. And that's the one thing I have is I think there was a lot to process in this movie, especially in the first
that's okay. That's when they're like. That's when Bucky reveals that there are more Winter Soldiers, and they were like, "What is Zemo trying to do?" He's like, "There's more of them. He's probably trying to get to them because he tells them before he leaves, I'm going to take down this empire."
Yeah,
and so they're like, "Oh damn, he's going to go get the other Winter Soldiers because there's 5 more." And Bucky shows like the whole training of these guys and the creation of these other ones. And so then they're like, "We need to go and get them." And that's when Falcon says, "I have some backup guys that can help us."
And so their plan turns into not trying to fight Iron Man's team. It's like, we got to do this. Iron Man's probably not going to believe us because he thinks Bucky did this. Mm-hmm. And so it's revealed that Bucky wasn't actually like the bomber, that it was Daniel Bruhl, that he
had prosthetics and had like framed him on purpose. But this was also great because this is where Civil War did turn into a Captain America movie, and not just
a Civil War movie. And that's not to say that not everybody gets their moments. Everyone gets their moments in this movie. But it was it's done really well. You don't think anybody's overshadowed, but it doesn't become... The only time I thought it was too much was the whole... And I didn't hate this, but it was the building of the relationship, the teasing of the relationship between Vision and Wanda. Mm-hmm. I liked the teasing, but at one point it got a little too much for me.
They didn't do it that much. They did two scenes at the beginning of the movie.
That's true, but at one point I think it was just the scenes themselves that moved really slow for me. That was just like,
because the Vision talks.
And so Cap's mission is to stop Zemo from turning on the other Winter Soldiers, and he doesn't think Iron Man will believe him if he tells him this whole story. So they're set on their way to try to stop Zemo, and that's when we get the big fight at the airport. But before this, I know I said I wanted to hit 25 minutes, but we're going to go longer than 25 minutes. I know, because
you have a lot to say about this next part.
And this is going to be a hell of a bitch to edit later, right after we stop recording this. So they started assembling their teams before the big fight, right? And so Hawkeye picks up Wanda, and he says, "We have one more stop to make." And then before we get to see who else they pick up, Tony and Black Widow,
who has scarlet hair. That's why I do that. And her name is Scarlett Johansson.
They're talking about okay, we're a little understaffed. What are we gonna do? And she's like, "Do you have someone?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Where's your guy at?" And she's like, "Down below." And she's talking about she wants to team up with Black Panther. And then she's like, "Why? Where's yours?" And that's when we get a shot of Queens. And I was really excited. I started clapping and no one else got it. And I was like...
I danced.
But I was the only one else... I was the only one clapping in the theater, and everybody else was silent. I was like, oh, they don't get it yet.
I had a moment of are we the nerdiest ones? Are we the only ones that are excited?
If Kind of Funny wasn't there, we would have been the nerdiest ones there. So... we see a kid going up an elevator, and we see him walk into this apartment, and we get Peter Parker, and he walks in, and Tony is talking to Aunt May. I never thought I would say that out loud about a movie, that Tony Stark is talking to Aunt fucking May. So Tony is there, and he's like, oh, he won this scholarship or this grant or whatever. And he's winking at him, blah 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 blah, and he asks Aunt May oh, can I have a couple minutes with him? They go into Peter's room, and we get to see a couple of snippets of the original Spider-Man costume, and I wish we got to see that a little more, because I think it's passed over a little bit, and so when we see him in the new Spider-Man outfit, I don't think it hits me as hard. If we got to see him actually more in action with that old suit, it would have been more of an oh shit when he gets the new suit. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I forget his name. I fucking forget this kid's name. who plays Peter Parker.
Oh.
How did you feel about the scene while I look up his name?
He was adorable. He was cute. He was the Peter Parker that, is quippy and sassy and talks really fast and, like, has a lot to say, but is, like, still a little kid. So, I don't know. I enjoyed his character. He was fun to watch.
This is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
This is Spider-Man. Tom Holland. So Tom Holland plays Peter Parker. This is Spider-Man. This is Peter Parker, guys. Yeah, and this is coming, like, I love Batman. Batman's my favorite superhero of all time. Spider-Man's, like, right underneath there. And my interpretation of Spider-Man, my Spider-Man has also always been the ultimate Spider-Man. And I think we're getting that a little bit of just, like, how he acts, of, like, he collects, like, old, like, fucking computers and shit, just because he's interested in them. And just the way he talks and this is Peter Parker. He blows the other two out of the fucking water. I know you like, what's his face, pretty boy, whatever. And you're allowed to, that's fine. But this is Peter Parker. This is Peter Parker. And I love the whole Iron Man asking, like, what's your shtick? Like, why do you do this and whatnot? But anyway, what I was saying is he was able to deliver the with great power comes great responsibility line without actually saying those words, because I think, like, people are pissed that in the first Amazing Spider-Man, Uncle Ben never says that. Right. But honestly, I think at this point it would become really cheesy because we all know that line, and I think
there was definitely a moment where he started talking about, I was like, are we gonna do the story again right now?
But he showed it enough in his face, and that's the thing is, like, there's a lot of great acting, and Tom Holland nails it.
Because he's saying so much without saying.
Because we all know the story, and you see it in his face and how he delivers those lines, and you're just like, it brings everything back, and he tells you the story without having to tell you, and the way he said the whole, I forget specifically how he said it, but the way he, like, the new way he says with great power comes great responsibility related to a lot of what the what was happening in the story, and it was so ingenious. So we got to meet Spider-Man, and then Cap's team meets up at the airport, and that's when we find out that the other guy that Hawkeye wanted to pick up was fucking Paul Rudd. And man, oh my god, what a dreamboat. And, like, him meeting Cap, and he's just like, you're Captain America. This is Captain America. I know you too.
You're great too, but this is Captain America. Hi, Captain America.
And seeing him, like, fanboy out for Cap was so great. And then, like, talking to Falcon being like, hey, sorry about that last time. He's like, it won't happen again. And that was just, like, one of those great moments. This movie has a very good, like, tone, it's very serious and grounded, and whenever there are light moments, it never feels forced or out of place. And that's, like, when you have a perfect, and that's what I said earlier, like, this is the perfect comic book movie, because comic books do that, they have very grounded stories, but then they also have the potential, or the not the potential, but the capacity to have lighter moments, and this movie definitely nails that.
Here was also the well thought out thing, because you're talking about, like, how there were these really fun, well thought out moments, but this scene also is the pivotal point, right? Like, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, they're hitting all those funny parts, like, these are the reasons why I love all the characters, like, Hawkeye's being sassy, Ant-Man's being funny, everyone's got their, like, personality showing, but this fight was also the changing point where, like, that also ended. Like, they have the first half of the fight where they're even bantering with each other as friends, and having this fight.
It was great when Winter Soldier and Falcon are running down the hall, and Spider-Man comes, and they're like, and he's what is like, that? He's like, what the hell is that? And Falcon says, everybody's got a fucking gimmick now.
Yeah,
he didn't say fucking, but
like, there are all these lines throughout those fights. Like, Falcon finally is able to take down Spider-Man, and both of them are laying there with, like, webs on their hands, like this kid just schooled us, and then Falcon finally gets him, and Winter Soldier looks over and was like, you couldn't have started with that, you know?
And then Falcon says back, I hate you.
I hate you, and it was the best line. It was so funny, because they have this whole, like, almost, like, bro-y competition with Captain America leading up to this whole moment. And that's really great.
That's an interesting story, that's an interesting sort of foil to what the whole story with Iron Man is, of, like, they both have sort of like Falcon and Winter Soldier have like a competition of the brotherly love for Cap, but they still know that, you know, when it comes down to it, like they both want what's best for Cap, and they both agree with Cap. And then you have the other side of it where Winter Soldier and Iron Man butt heads, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And so this big fight happens.
So that's what I was trying to point out, like, they do all this fun stuff, and then they like say it like, now we have to do this seriously, and everything changes. The tone changes. There's no more quips, like, and when they do the whole like lineup shot and the montage, and they're running into battle to each other, Spider-Man gets the last line where he says, "Oh, they're still running. They're not stopping," and then it starts, right?
Yeah.
But when it starts and like these best friends start, like they show Hawkeye and Black Widow start fighting with each other, and I was like on the verge of tears, like, no.
And that's the weird thing. I never like. I was on the verge of tears during all these very emotional fights because, and that's the thing this movie does so well. And I hate to compare it to Batman v Superman, and it's because they've spent so many movies building up a lot of these characters, so it is very emotional when you see them fight. And that's the bad thing the thing Batman v Superman did not do, is like we didn't really get to know these characters, so why should we give a shit that they're fighting? And that's like Captain America nails that on the fucking head.
Yeah.
And you know, there are like certain points of like, well, Spidey and Black Panther are new, like why should we like care like why they're fighting, but like I think Black Panther is a better example of like, we know why he's fighting.
Yeah, they show Black Panther and they show Winter Soldier fighting, and it was just as emotional because Black Panther thinks that Winter Soldier killed his dad, and Winter Soldier is trying to defend his character. He's like, that wasn't me, someone framed me. Yeah, I didn't do anything wrong.
We get why Spider-Man's fighting, but it's not as emotionally resonant with why everybody else. He's just trying to impress Tony, really. He's just like, because at one point he's like, hey, I have one job, it's to impress Tony, so I'm just gonna go back over to the main fight, right? And God, this whole fight scene was this is the climax. This is the climax of the entire MCU. Just the quips of like my favorite part is Spider-Man taking on Falcon and Winter Soldier of you know, they're being sassy, and you know, Spider-Man like blocks Winter Soldier's punch. Yeah. He's like, you have a metal arm? That's so cool, dude.
No, you're forgetting. I know what's your favorite part. Because so then they're like, okay, this was beautiful too. Not all of us are going to get out of this fight, and sometimes the way to win is for some of us to lose. So they're like, Captain and Winter Soldier, you have to go on your own, and we're going to stay back and distract them. We need a really big distraction. And Ant-Man is like, oh, I have the perfect solution.
Yeah, so before we get to that, because it's great, yeah, so I just want to bring back to like why they're all fighting is they're trying to get into a helicopter.
They're trying to travel over to Siberia, where they know the Winter Soldiers, the other soldiers were created, and where they are stashed. And Zemo's already on his way.
So the whole point is they're trying to get to this plane to be able to fly away, to go to there, and so the rest of Cap's team knows the importance of just trying to get to there. So they're like, okay, like we're going to distract them, but we need a bigger distraction. And
he even delivers stuff. I lied. They do keep up the funny, but this is where it ends. This is the last funny.
So Ant-Man is like, he's very tiny. He's running. He's like, oh, I've got a big distraction.
Yeah.
And I giggled because I was like, that's, if you read into that, that's a sex joke. But also, he's like, okay, like I'm gonna try it, and I've only tried it once, and when I did it, like it was in a lab, and I passed out. So if I split in half or something, just like
don't forget me.
And then you see him slide his bar all the way up, and he turns fucking giant, and that's when I teared up. And it wasn't like I got really emotional during the emotional parts, but it was anything to do with Spider-Man and realizing that Spider-Man was in this universe, I like teared up a lot. I teared up during like Tony being at Peter Parker's fucking apartment, and then also just when Ant-Man's really big and Spider-Man is fucking fighting big ass Ant-Man, and it was done so well. And
I was also momentarily alarmed because in the comic books, when they have one of their first big fights, one of the first big fights against Team Cap and Team Iron Man, the death is of Goliath.
And he's like,
so I was like, oh my god, Ant-Man's getting big. Is this their replacement? Because the whole like polarizing and changing, the shift in that comic was Goliath being killed. Yeah. And I was like, oh my god, are they doing this because Ant-Man is going to be the parallel for Goliath and now he's going to die? So I panicked for a moment, but it was all okay. It was all okay.
And then with the no, this was my favorite part. This was my favorite part.
Yes, see, this is it. So, I knew it was your favorite part.
Ant-Man's distracting everybody, and I love that, like, he's just, like, moving, like, really, I know, really
I loved
slow.
that because he's bigger, he has to
Because you don't really get that, you don't really get that in the comics when, like, people are big, you think that they're, like, still
the same.
So I loved that his agility, like, went down, because it's very realistic.
He even talked a little bit slower and deeper. It was funny.
And the best part is they're all trying to take down Ant-Man, and Spider-Man's like, have you guys seen that old movie?
Really old movie?
Empire Strikes Back.
And all of them are just like, how old is this kid? Where did you get him?
And he's like, because he's trying to describe all of the, like, things in the beginning, like Hoth battle, and he doesn't know the names of them. He's like,
that Zoe plays? Those big things.
Like, those big things and how they took those big things down, and then he starts wrapping his web around Ant-Man's legs, and it's...
They just did. It was a long Star Wars reference too. Like they didn't just say, how he did that thing, and then he does it. He keeps narrating, talking about this scene.
And I know it's like sort of scary that Disney sort of has a monopoly on entertainment properties, but like they get to do that shit.
So much
that
nerdiness.
Was so fucking cool. So the big fight happens, and it comes down to like Cap and Bucky are
running they're gonna steal the helicarrier that they came in.
Yeah, so they're gonna they're stealing it's not a heli, it's one of the smaller like shield ships.
They're planes.
And so they're trying to get there, and they see Black Widow, and at that moment I was like, fuck, Black Widow's gonna die. Because I thought it was gonna come down to her like being like, I need to stop you guys. But then because she said like, I'm gonna regret this, and she points out her gun, but then she shoots and it's not like a gun, but it's like it's almost
electric, like the icers that they use in Shield.
Yeah, and so Black Panther's behind them, and she keeps like because it's only slowing him down for like a split second, so she keeps shooting him going. And then they get away, and War Machine and Iron Man start flying away to try to catch them. And Falcon is behind War Machine. And War Machine's like, Vision, like, I've got a bogey on my 6. And Vision is being distracted seeing if Wanda is safe. And that was another great, like, tease of, like, because they talk about later, like, Tony's talking to Vision later, like I didn't know you could get distracted. And Vision's like, I didn't know that either. And so they're slowly teasing this fucking relationship, and I really, really like it. And I think it's done way better, and it's more natural than I think the whole Hulk and Black Widow dynamic. I didn't hate that dynamic, but I think the way they did it, especially watching it earlier today, the way they did it felt like it overstayed its welcome, and it got into like really weird, unnecessary places, while this was like short and sweet, and it was all it needed to be. And so Vision's distracted by Wanda, and he finally pays attention to like War Machine, like, hey, I'm in trouble. And so Vision looks up and he sees Falcon. He like aims his like the mind gem at Falcon, and he shoots him. And Falcon, like his suit senses that he's about to be hit, so he pulls down, and the shot ends up hitting War Machine. And this was like this was the moment where everybody, like, the theater was quiet because he's falling, and you just see
machine power, his suit powers down, his suit, nothing.
Yeah, and you just see like there's a shot of it, like, how they do like inside the helmet, like shot of like Tony and, Rhodey. And you see him and it's just black in there, and that was the moment where I was like, oh fuck, like I thought like they might have put that moment in the trailer where Tony's holding him.
No, they did.
No, I know they did, but like it was one of those obvious like, okay, since they put it in the trailer, there's no way it's obviously gonna happen, and because of that, like, because I'm fucking weird, I was like, maybe they put it in the trailer on purpose to make us think he wouldn't die, but then he actually dies. No, he doesn't die. But there's still that fucking moment where it's almost as shocking and like as just like gasp inducing, even though this isn't that great of a movie, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, when, spoilers for that movie, even though it's irrelevant now, when Gwen hits the ground. And it's like, holy fuck, they went there. And because you think like either, because Falcon also is trying to fly down, not even just Iron Man, Falcon's also trying to fly down to like try to maybe catch War Machine. And neither of them get to him in time. And now it's just like the fucking like everybody was silent. Yeah. And of course he was fine. He is paralyzed though, which was like, oh shit, like there are repercussions. And that was the one, like I was scared there weren't going to be any repercussions. I thought like everybody was going to go away from this movie like okay. And I was, even though, so I think they did what they could without having to kill off a character, because Marvel tries so hard to not kill off any main characters, which they need to do at some point. And it's so weird because yes, there are small repercussions, but I felt like there should have been a bigger one, because another spoiler, no one dies in this movie, and that was sort of in a movie, the theme of this movie is about repercussions of things that you guys don't think about, and in this movie about dealing with repercussions, you don't have any, like, it's all about the repercussions of like the general like world, right, of like people's families are being killed and all this stuff, and then you don't have any repercussions inside your team, like no one dies, and it's a weird thing, and it's probably something I want to talk about. It's probably another conversation for another time. So anyway, they like Rhodey is paralyzed, and Tony knows that Black Widow was stopping Black Panther from stopping them, and then the rest of the team gets imprisoned. And this was sort of an allusion to the negative zone, but it wasn't nearly what the negative zone was. But they do imprison Hawkeye, Wanda, and Falcon, and Ant-Man. And so they're all in prison. Tony goes to see them because he's trying to get information out of them of where Cap is going. But at this point he realizes that he was wrong, that he finds out like
he figured out that what Zemo had done.
Yeah, he figured out like Winter Soldier was framed and Zemo was behind all of this.
And also I think that one of the most powerful shots too is they frame into this prison and you see Wanda wrapped up like a crazy person in a straitjacket.
Yep.
And like a thing around her neck, and it's just like fucked up, Tony. Yep. Fucked up.
And so he sneaks into or he doesn't sneak, but he like the power goes out he silences their audio feed,
so that he can talk to them.
And so he's like, hey, we only have 30 seconds. I know I was wrong about this. I want to go and help them as a friend. And so Falcon tells Iron Man like, hey, they're going to Siberia to stop the other Winter Soldiers. And so Cap and Winter Soldier get there, and we find out that
Black Panther has been following them.
Black Panther's been following them, and also
this was the moment where in my head I kept saying to myself, "My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die."
And also Iron Man meets up with them, and there's like this whole moment of, "Hey, I'm sorry, I was wrong." And you're like, "Oh shit, they're gonna team up." But then there's like right when that happens, there's a part from the trailer where I was like, but wait, that hasn't happened yet. So what's going to happen that's going to cause that? And so they go into this room where all of the Winter Soldiers are put under, and they're
already
dead. They're dead.
They're already dead.
And they're shot. Like you see like
right in the forehead.
Yeah, like they've been shot in the foreheads, and you're like, why would Zemo do this? And this is when okay, so like they walk into this room, and Zemo is like behind this like really like behind this glass that's like well protected and all this stuff, and he's explaining his plan. And this is where I love this, and I hope we actually don't. Maybe we see Zemo in one other movie. I don't want him to overstay his welcome, because here's the cool thing about Zemo is that the entire time, again, this was a slow burn of, is he part of Hydra? Is he a part of, like, is he doing something for Sokovia? Like, what is his motivation? We finally learn it, and he's just a guy. Like, yes, he was part of, like, a Sokovia task force and all this stuff, but when it comes down to it, he's not working for some greater power.
He was just another victim of...
His family, his entire family was killed. Or not, like, his dad lived.
He's another victim of the repercussions of the choices of the Avengers.
I'm sorry, I know we're going all the way back, but a good homage to the Civil War comic book. One of the reasons that Tony accepts this bill is because he meets the mother of someone. That was
the one that you cut me off on in our non-spoiler version, because I was going to say the illusion of the mother telling him, like, you're the reason my child is dead, and that's what drives Tony in the comic books.
And so I thought that was a really... I'm sorry I cut you off. And
that is what I was trying to get at.
I'm glad we went back to that, because that
was
a
parallels
really...
that
was a very, like, that was the biggest fan service without being, like, super comic booky, you know? That was, like, if you've read this comic, you know what this is from. And that was, like, a really cool, like, very small homage. So, going back to where we were at in the story, and, so Zemo just reveals, like, you guys killed my entire family, and all I wanted to do, like, I read up on, like, the past of Winter Soldier, because all of this was leaked on the internet by Black Widow, and all I wanted to do was tear you guys apart, and that was...
The Empire was the Avengers.
Yes.
He wanted to take down the Avengers.
Yes, and so he makes this great analogy about, like, if you try to destroy an empire from the outside, they're able to rebuild themselves, but if you try to destroy it from the inside, there's no foundation to build upon anymore. And that was so fucking great. Of, like, he did, in a way, make this entire movie happen.
So it was interesting,
and it wasn't in like a super forced way of, like, oh, I'm crazy, and, you know, I'm fucking not sorry, I'm trying to make another Batman v Superman comparison, but I'm not Lex Luthor. Like, Lex Luthor, I don't even want to get into that, but, like, his motivation, like, we don't really understand ever why Lex is doing what he's doing, but Zemo's motivation, I think, is enough for, like, I get where he's coming from.
But it's also
I don't agree with how he's doing it or why he's doing it, but, like, I get it.
Yeah. So there's the Civil War. That's the obvious one of, like, for the Accords and not for the Accords. But now there's this other one of, like, can I do the reveal here?
Okay, so here's the big reveal.
So the big reveal is that Tony's parents were killed by Bucky Barnes as the Winter Soldier.
And did we know this?
I didn't.
Because I feel like I did.
I didn't.
And when they're talking about it, of, like,
I didn't know.
I didn't know that Cap knew that was the thing. And
I didn't know about this at all. But
there was a weird moment where I was like, I feel like I knew this, but I don't remember Cap knowing this. And I'm going to have to do a lot of reading after I edit this video to see, like, why I knew that. Because when they revealed it, I was like, oh shit, I knew this already. Tony's going to realize it.
As soon as Tony said, I know that road, I was like, no, and then I was like, this is super fucked up.
I love that in both Batman v Superman and Cap 3, both of the, like, main points have to do with mothers.
My mommy. That was me too. I laughed in this very terrible time. I was very upset, but then I had a moment of, like, oh my god, mommy, and then I was like, oh my god, this is so much more well done of a mommy issue in Civil War than they tried to make it a mommy issue in Batman versus Superman.
Not well.
No, but this was just like, he killed his mom, but he didn't know he was killing his mom because he's brainwashed. So he didn't have a choice. And that's his whole, like, battle for Winter Soldier is, like, I've done all of these terrible things. And yes, I was brainwashed. Yes, I didn't have a choice, but it was still me. It was still, the blood is still on my hands, even though it was out of my control. And you can tell he has all this grief and all of this guilt, and he feels terrible about it. Even though he knows he's not technically responsible, he still feels responsible. So you feel for him, but then you're also like, oh dang, because they have this whole scene at the beginning where Tony is, like, traumatized by the fact that of the day his parents died.
Yeah, exactly. And so like... this final fight, the thing we see in the trailer with the moment I was like, oh, that hasn't happened yet, is just Cap, Bucky, and Iron Man fighting, and it's just because Iron Man is so fucking
rageful about his
angry,
parents,
and
which is understandable.
Totally. And so that was a very
and it was terrible because you watch Winter Soldier like literally kill them with his bare hands. We had to watch that. Tony had to watch that. The whole thing is recorded, and it's not just a car accident. You see that he had to brutally murder them because it had to look like a car accident, and they tell him no
witnesses.
Yeah. So but it's all videotaped, so it wasn't just a car accident.
Oh yeah, we get this big reveal of like how Tony's parents really died, and him finally realizing that, because that was something that they talk about sort of in the beginning of the movie. Mm-hmm. It's something that they allude to in the very beginning of this fucking universe, right? Like the very first movie, they talk about in the very like one of the very first scenes. They're like, and then came the death of this big like. Huge successful person, right? When Tony's being given the award in the very first Iron Man movie. And so it was just like things came back from the very first movie, and that was fucking crazy and really cool. And so
I love that Black Panther found everything out without having to be
a part of it.
Yeah, because he was just stalking them because he was gonna go kill Winter Soldier, and then that's the best. The whole time he was just like a cat. The whole time I was just like, wow. Sorry, I'm such a cat lady. But anyway, so he finds it out, and they do it beautifully without having to be like, Black Panther, here's what happened. They just casually make the right statement, and he is a smart person. He's so wise. That's why I like admire his character so much, because he's a prince, and he's regal, and he's a panther, and he's so wise. He always makes good choices, and he has like one of the best lines when he goes finally to face Zemo, because he's like, now I know that you're the one who killed my father. And he's like, they are so consumed with vengeance. And you are so consumed with vengeance. And that's how this whole problem started. And he's like, I'm ready to not let the vengeance control me. Yep. And I was just like, Black Panther, this is why you are
very wise. Yeah.
So wise. So wise.
And so Cap, in the middle of their fight, like Bucky's metal arm gets ripped off, which was like, holy fuck.
But
that
also
is crazy.
Really symbolic.
Yeah.
I thought it was important.
Yeah. And then there's just like this amazing shot of while Zemo, there's like a voiceover of like Zemo and Black Panther talking to each other, and Zemo talking about like why he was doing this and trying to tear them apart. And there's like a great shot of like Winter Soldier and
Captain working together.
No, Winter Soldier and Iron Man fighting, and Cap is like over there, and there's this moment of like, who is he going? Like, he has a choice right now, right? And like the obvious choice is Bucky, but it's also just like really like, who does he defend at this point? And because he knows like what he can't defend Bucky at this point. Like, he can say like, yes, this wasn't Bucky, like he was being controlled by Hydra,
it's totally
but it's
understandable
still...
where Tony is coming from.
Exactly, but then there's also this other great shot of Zemo talking about tearing them down and having them kill each other, and Cap and Iron Man are fucking just going at it. And in the end, it was scary, and there was a point where it was like, oh shit, Cap is gonna kill him.
Yeah.
And so they walk away. Cap and Bucky walk away because Cap took out like Iron Man's like power, and they just leave. And this movie does so well, and this is why I love. I know I'm gonna relate it to something totally not related, but Batman New 52. If you've read Endgame, there is a Batman versus Superman fight, and you know the big question people always love to ask: who wins, Batman or Superman? And there's a great line in Batman Endgame where at the end of the fight, like the inner monologue of Bruce is, people like to ask the question of like, who wins in our fight? And the real answer is no one wins. And this movie is able to say that so well without having to like say it, you know? Because at the end of it, it was like, no one won from this. And that was another great thing about the Civil War comic also. Is like at the end of that comic, it's like no one really won.
Well, it was interesting because it ends because Captain literally looks around, and I was wondering if they were going to do this in the movie, and they don't really. No. He literally looks around at the battle and realizes like, no matter what I'm standing for, it's not worth all of us fighting against each other. Like he says, I think, about like the fight. He gives up, and they're all like, "What are you doing?
And
what are you doing?
And
Stop!"
then he gets arrested, and then
he's like, "Because we cannot fight like this."
And then comes the assassination of Captain America in the comics, not in the movie. They didn't do that in this.
They didn't take that route in this movie.
Sort of disappointing because I was expecting.
I know, because it was also like very much of like Captain America's character, like for him to stop and look and be like, "This is not the right thing after all."
So they stop fighting, and at one point, like Tony's back at like the Avengers place, and he's helping Rhodey. Like he's got like this
rehab.
He's helping Rhodey through like rehab. And we get the great Stan Lee cameo.
And Vision's just chilling in the back.
Yeah, Vision's just chilling, and we get the great Stan Lee where he's a UPS delivery man. He's like, "Is this for Tony Stank?" And he's delivered something from.
It's from Captain.
From Cap, and it's a recording about like, "Hey, I'm glad you're with the team, and I'm glad you're not just like hiding away in your mansion by yourself." And
this is where I realized this is why Captain is my favorite character, because he goes on this whole talk about he believes in the greater good of people. That's what he's always believed in. And that's all, I feel that way too. And I think that's why with all these superhero registration like issues, because they even do this in The Incredibles. But when I read the comics and when I watched this movie, it was like, of course I side with Captain America, and of course I feel like superheroes are superheroes because they are above us, they are better, and I trust they are better people than us, and I trust them to ultimately do what is right, or to have the moral fiber in them Scarlet Witch messed up, but she didn't do that, heartlessly, mercilessly. She messed up and she was upset and she was torn and she was going through emotional anguish for it. And I think that superheroes are allowed to make mistakes, but I also see them as superheroes because I trust them to make the better choices. And this is why Captain is one of my favorites. That's why Captain was one of my favorites before, and I would say that because he is such a good, upstanding like citizen, a good person. And then he names it in this letter of like, the reason I stand for what I stand for is because I believe that I believe in people and I believe in the good of people. And I was like, me too, Cap, me too. That's why you're my favorite. That's why I agree with you. That's why I stand by you and not needing to be registered and not being told what to do. Because you can make a mistake, but you can still be a good person and try to fix it and make up for it. And superheroes are allowed to do that, I think.
And while that recording is going on, he's breaking out the rest of the team that's in that prison facility. You see, like, Falcon turn around. He's, like, making a smug face, and Cap walks up. And that's, like, where the movie ends.
And also, it ends with the line of, he's telling Tony this, but it also means the same for Falcon and his team.
But he's also like, just for people in general.
Yes, if you need me, I will be there.
Yeah.
And he just smiles, his beautiful, handsome smile. And I was just like...
And then it ends, and then we get I thought the mid credits scene and the after credits scene were pretty weak, actually. Mid credits I don't think was bad, and I don't. It
meant a lot to me. Yeah, that mid credit scene meant a lot to me.
Yeah. So Bucky decides to put himself under again until they can find a way to wipe away the Winter Soldier part of his mind, and that was actually okay. Wipe that. I don't think they're terrible mid credits or end credit scenes. So
it was It wasn't like exciting, but I think it was important to the story.
It's not going to be like it's not going to be
a plot point in the future.
It's not the end of Avengers when Purple Hulk.
I don't know what he's trying to do.
Purple Hulk. Thanos.
Purple Hulk. Thanos.
Yeah. I know he's not really Purple Hulk, but he's a big dude and he's purple. So it's not going to be like a Thanos reveal, right? But so Bucky decides to put himself under,
and also I noticed that they didn't replace his arm. Yeah. And when Iron Man knocked his arm off, I was like, this is like his way of getting back at you, because that's the part of you that killed his parents. You didn't, but that part of you that they put on you and programmed you to do. And I was like, so it's great that I think that he didn't replace it, because I think it's a metaphor. Like this part of him is gone. That's not who he is.
It stands for something.
It does stand for something. And then he puts himself under because he does feel so much guilt and turmoil over like what has been done to him.
Yeah. And so, and then the after credits scene is Peter. He's back at home, and he makes the great excuse, which he always does in the comics, of whenever he's out fighting villains and stuff, he's like, oh, I got beat up at school, or I was in a fight, or whatever, right? And Aunt May comes in, he gets like this little like signal, because he got like a new suit, so he got like new web slingers and whatnot, and he presses something, he's like, oh shit, I gotta hide this, and Aunt May comes back in, puts like an ice pack on his head, and then she leaves. And then he like reveals like what like the little light out of his web slinger is showing, and it's the Spidey logo. And I love that after that, because they always do like the so and so will return, and this time it wasn't Captain America, it was, and they always say like what movie they'll return in, and all it said was Spider-Man will return.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even like he'll return in this movie or this movie.
Just coming back, bitches.
He's coming back. We know you guys wanted him, and you're gonna get more of him, and that was the fucking best. Alyssa, we've spent a lot of time. Oops. I wanted this video to be like 20, and it's okay. Same thing happened with Batman v Superman, where I wanted it to be like 25 minutes, and then it ended up being like an hour.
You can't. It was so well done. We couldn't.
Yeah. So, favorite parts of the movie. Name like three highlights of the movie for you.
You go first.
Okay, so my three highlights, I would say, the Peter Parker, Tony Stark scene where they're at the apartment, Ant-Man becoming giant, and then the final fight scene between Tony, Cap, and Bucky. The other scenes that I liked, and we didn't actually talk about this a lot, but Peggy passes away.
Bring up. So much emotion.
Yeah, and that's very.
All he does is get a text that says she is gone, and I was like,
and you know immediately.
No!
You know immediately.
I knew.
And it's sort of weird that Cap and Sharon Carter end up making out a little bit in this movie, because you're like, dude, you sort of dated her grandma, like her aunt, right? And so it's just like. That's a little weird, but
that happens in the comics.
That's true.
He has a relationship with Sharon in the comics.
That's true. I still think it's a little weird.
Whatever. Yes, Peggy. Very sad. So sad. So sad. But and also that was a nice moment of they already knew that they had two different opinions, and Black Widow goes to him, and they talk a little bit about it, and at the end of that conversation, she's like, "So if you know that I'm not gonna sign, why are you here?" She was just like, because I want to be with you. I didn't want you to be alone.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
and like very much of like, and it's like when Sharon is giving like the speech at Peggy's funeral, and she's talking about like, you know, people always like I always asked her like, how could she like
how did she succeed in espionage and diplomacy when people at that time didn't want women to be good at either one of those things? And she said, you have to stand for what you believe in.
And that was such a great of like
relating to what was going on in the story as well. It was
relating what was going on, and it was also like emotionally resonant for Cap, and sort of letting go of Peggy. And it was that's another highlight, I would say. I'm sorry that we sort of pass over that part, because it is a big part.
I appreciated the connection that Spider-Man and Cap had very quickly when they were fighting. When he was like sort of impressed with Spider-Man, he was like, "Where do you come from?" He was like, "Queens," and then Captain's like, "Oh, Brooklyn."
I'm from Brooklyn. Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh,
and then they bring that back in the end credits scene where he's and she's like, where's he from? He's like, oh, he's from Brooklyn.
I know, it was cute.
It was very cute. And so, Alyssa, been talking for about an hour and 5 minutes about this movie.
Yeah.
For the people who like numbered scores and whatnot, if you had to give this,
I can't do that.
You can't do it. You can't do it.
I just like things.
Okay.
And usually I like most things. I did really enjoy this movie. I can't rate it because we had a old rating system. We had an old show called Quick Reviews. Yeah. We had like the score system, which was like fuck ye, and pfft. What would you give it out of those? Yeah, I liked it so much.
So fuck ye?
Yeah.
Okay. Since I can think a little more in numbers and whatnot. And if I had to give this a numbered score, I would give it a 10 out of 10. I would give it a 10 out of 10, and that doesn't mean it doesn't come with faults. But I honestly think this is the perfect comic book movie. It's the perfect combination of both of those elements. The story is very character driven and emotionally resonant, and I think it has the best character development so far in a Marvel cinematic universe, and it goes in depth into those without spending too much time on each character.
Not so much, so all that's true too, but also like you watch these kinds of movies to see the superheroes fighting and to see them, like, I was impressed with the way that they worked together. It was inspiring, like seeing them, you see them in their own movies and they're amazing and you're like, oh, look how badass he is. And then you see them work together to do things and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what you come to watch superhero teams for. Because you can see them build off of each other and play off of each other and help each other, and it makes the whole fight scene that much more impressive. So you get to see that as well, which I really enjoyed about the movie too.
I think the action is the best action in any comic book movie ever. Again, like I said earlier, you feel the punches, you feel the emotional punches. The one downside I have is sort of the just the slow pace at the very in the first third of the movie, but when it picks up, it picks the fuck up. And not to say that I hated the first third of the movie. I still really enjoyed the time, but it was to a point where I was like, all right, let's get to the next point here. But that's really the only bad thing I have to say about this movie. I think the only other thing I'm just gonna say is Spider-Man. Fucking Spider-Man.
I was pretty happy Ant-Man was in it.
Yeah, Paul Rudd. Goddamn,
I do like Paul Rudd.
He ages like a fine wine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for BzG's official Captain America Civil War review. If you've seen the movie, I hope, if you're still watching at this point, I hope you've seen the movie, unless you're a fucking monster and you don't care about spoilers. Fucking monsters out there. They're probably the same people who saw, like, I Am Legend and they didn't care that the dog died and, like, told everybody. I had that happen to me. Someone told me the dog died before I got to see the movie. I was like, fuck.
I didn't watch that movie.
Ugh. Fucking monsters out there. But anyway, what do you guys think about the movie? You can leave your thoughts in the comments below, or you can tweet them at me and let's have a discussion about it, because I like having discussions. At BananaLuchong, my Twitter link is in the description below. Alyssa doesn't like to advertise her Twitter, so I won't advertise it today. But if you want to...
But if you say something cool to him and I see it, I'll probably respond.
Or you can, if you have any specific questions for her, you can leave them in the comments below, and I'll let her know about it. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining me today as well. One last thank you. Hopefully this goes up in a timely manner. Hopefully this goes up at the same time as BzG News, so if you're done watching this and want to get some crazy news for the week, go on over and watch that. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and until next time, until next time, have a great day full of all amazing, fantastic, spectacular movies, much like Captain America Civil War. Thank you.